Welcome to a new episode of the FullScope Cybercast, Safeguarding the Digital Frontier. I'm your host, Matt Van Pelt, and with me today is FullScope IT CTO Dan Welk. How are you today, Dan?
Great. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing awesome. Also, we have Brian Amadeo from Business Development. How's it going, Brian?
How you doing, Matt? I'm doing well.
I'm doing great. And we also have Matthew Kelly, a member of the FullScope IT technical team. How are you, Matthew?
Getting over a cold, but I'm pretty good, I think.
Well, thanks for joining us and soldiering on. It's appreciated. So, we'll get this episode started with our buzzword, which is VoIP, which stands for Voiceover Internet Protocol. Dan, could you explain to our listener what VoIP is?
Well, it's basically a telephone service, but back in the old days, before we had electricity or whatever, phone lines, you used to have to run to your house, and they would run a pair of wires to every house, or sometimes even, in the really old days, they would run a pair of wires to a whole neighborhood, and everybody would share the phone. And it led to a lot of cabling and a lot of big switches and a lot of electricity used and big giant phones. And in the early days of the internet, there were some people who came up with this idea that they could send real-time audio over the internet and then connect it to the phone lines. And it really exploded from there to the point where you could run entire large businesses with phones that are really connected through the internet, just like your computer with your web browser connects to the internet. And I think most people have used technologies like Zoom or FaceTime, but VoIP is really just the audio portion of that that connects to either a physical phone or an app on your cell phone or an app on your computer that lets any of these things make phone calls to any other phone anywhere in the world.
Did anybody else here have a Magic Jack?
I never got
those.
Oh, I remember that. So,
yeah.
Oh yeah, the TV
The little dongle. Yeah, to do that initial VoIP service.
My current favorite little doohickey is an Obi-Hi device. They got bought out by some much bigger company, but they're these little teeny squares that you just plug into your router and you plug a phone into it, and they're like the only device like that can connect to Google Voice, which is cool. But it'll connect to any other online phone provider that you care to use, and then you can just plug in your you'd plug in a standard phone. So if you got a really nice cordless phone that you want to keep using, you can get these little teeny boxes that'll turn it into a VoIP phone, as long as you have a router with an Ethernet jack to plug it into.
Since VoIP is based on the internet, if the internet goes down, I'm assuming phones go down. And what do you do in that? Is there a backup plan you can put in place for? I'm talking for businesses, I guess, at this point.
Sure. If the internet goes down, to some degree, the phones will go down. But it's a very nuanced question because there are ways to compensate for this. You can either have it so that your phone number, if your VoIP phone is offline for whatever reason, you can have it forward to a cell phone or another landline if one's available, so that your incoming calls will continue to come in. And VoIP isn't always an internet product. While you can get your phones directly through the internet, or you can plug them anywhere into the internet and the phone comes online, there are also VoIP systems where there's VoIP PBX or small phone switch that can sit in your office so that your phones can use the same Ethernet networking that you have for your computers, or even Wi-Fi, and then that PBX can use internet phone lines or traditional phone lines in some sort of blend, so that even if the internet's down, the phone system in your office can remain up.
Here's a couple other things you could do, yeah, to like Dan says, a super nuanced question, but you could do like redundant internet providers. So that would be, you have like Verizon, say you have Verizon fiber and Spectrum fiber in your area. You could plug both of those in to your firewall. That way, if Verizon goes down, I've been to a spot though. If we're gonna go way further down the rabbit hole, where like a tractor trailer just destroyed like 2 telephone poles and brought down everything. So at that point, it's like, doesn't matter if you have Spectrum or Verizon,
Right.
like the pole is dead. Doesn't even matter if you have regular old, plain old telephone lines. It's gonna go down. So a lot that you can do too is 4G internet. So in a case where your internet does go down, and we're all depending on wires. Again, this starts getting into like a lot of the nuanced stuff. But you could have your primary provider for internet could be fiber. Then the secondary would be cellular. So if any instance did happen where something got knocked out with your primary, and something happened with wiring and all that stuff, you could just go pure like 4G. I don't know, 5G now, cellular to keep it back up. But there's a lot of stuff you can do, and there's a lot of money you could spend on things that could happen.
And on that note too, if you've got a web or mobile application from your VoIP system, now your typical mobile phone is still going to be an active handset, and so you could still be sending, receiving business calls from that standpoint. The other point I think that's important for people to know too is that even if your external network is down, your internal network, as long as that's up, your phone system internally within the office and calling from extension to extension and things like that would still be working. And you're still going to get, and that's why I say, assuming your network is still up, right?
If you have a PBX, then that's true. If there's a phone system in your office, you'll still be able to call extension to extension. But if your phones are only internet connected phones, and the internet is down, then you won't even be able to call phone to phone.
Even within that same building?
In most internet only systems.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
I think you have to start asking yourself some questions like, how reliable is my internet? How often does it go down? What's the cost to my business per minute or per hour when the phones are down? And these answers are going to vary greatly depending on the business and the location and the area. Some places might have really, really rock solid internet where all the cables are buried underground for miles and miles and miles, and it hasn't gone down in 10 years. And all this redundancy may just be at the cost of extra services and extra configuration time and extra complexity and more things to update and fix when there's problems. And a simple internet connected phone may be the most reliable and least expensive thing.
Yeah, I think the two scenarios that I've seen, instead of going like crazy, like what if the building burns down and a semi truck hits the hits a cable or a telephone pole at the same time. Instead of that, I've seen most people either forward numbers, like so if their system is down, it'll forward to a cell phone. Or I know during COVID, a huge jump to voice over IP was because you could just take a voice over IP phone and literally bring it anywhere. So you could bring it to an individual employee's house, plug it into your ISP router, switch, whatever, and all of a sudden your phone works, so you can dial through extensions. That was like wildly popular then. So sometimes just the simplest stuff, people just do that instead of wanting to spend another $200 a month on a secondary internet line.
I guess it would come down to the type of business, right? And then how we rely on a phone. Are you a service-based business that gets phone calls all day? Take us as an example.
Oh, for sure,
right?
Yeah.
Super important for us to have some fail-safe and backup stuff going on there. But if you're not that scenario and construction company, mostly people in the field working off of mobile devices, they could probably manage for a few hours and not interrupt business or revenue.
Yeah, for us, it's particularly easy because we have people always in multiple geographic locations, and even if we have an internet outage in one location, it's not going to go down everywhere. And every single one of our employees carries a cell phone. And if we really needed to, we could bring up the extensions on the cell phones or our laptops. And I think a lot of us also do use the soft phones on their laptops rather than a desk phone. Anyhow, I know I have both sitting next to each other, and I my hands are on the keyboard and near my mouse, and when a phone call comes in, it's just easier for me to click that answer button in the app than it is to reach across the desk and
That's
pick up
my
the
go-to.
handset and have the
Yeah.
wire hanging all over the place. Um, so it's my go-to, yeah, as well.
Yeah, I think I go mobile application or web application, mobile on my mobile device application second, and then the desktop, the actual physical phone is my by far least used in my three options.
Yeah, I really only have the physical phone on my desk so that I can help support customers who do prefer that, so that I can make sure the experience is what it should be and that the functions are working correctly. But that doesn't mean I have to use it when my phone rings.
So, would a slow internet connection affect the quality of a call when you're using VoIP? And are there ways to fix it if it does?
Uh, this is another nuanced question. Slow internet connection could have an impact on voice over IP, but the typical voice over IP connection is only going to use 100 kilobits per second. And at this point, most of us are measuring our internet speeds in the tens of megabits per second. So every megabit should be able to handle 10 phone calls. So you have 10 megabits, that's like 100 simultaneous phone calls. That's pretty, that's a pretty good sized business that's running 100 simultaneous phone calls into one location. So there can be times where the internet does slow down, and most of this can be resolved on firewalls where a QoS can be put into place. Quality of service rules can be put in place that make sure to slow down the less important traffic so that your voice over IP always comes through with the bandwidth that it needs to keep the calls working correctly. And then if you have very, very critical needs, there's even devices that'll use two internet connections and send and receive all the VoIP packets on both of them at once, and kind of like a RAID array of redundant hard drives. It'll look at which one's getting the packets to you fastest and use that and just throw out the other one. That's SD-WAN, software defined wide area networking technology. But that's really usually put in place for businesses that have really, really critical telephone quality needs.
I'm trying to think of the last time I heard like a VoIP gurgle or whatever you'd call it. It's been some time. I mean, and usually you can reestablish the phone call again, and if it's really bad and it's gone.
Well, the internet used to be based heavily on a lot of analog circuitry, and even the digital circuits were copper, which were much more prone to noise or error or dropouts. And as so much of the internet has moved to fiber optics now, um, very often, like I was saying, that just the simple internet connection with just internet connected phone may be the best option because it will work perfectly so much of the time that it may not be worth spending extra for these technologies for that 5 minutes a year that you're having problems.
Yeah, it's pretty reliable. I don't notice much of a difference anymore.
So how about safety? Is VoIP phones safer than the old telephone system as far as somebody like listening to your phone call?
I'm getting tired of saying these are nuanced questions. um,
Just assume they're all going to be, and you can just go from there.
The safety can be much, much better than any previous telephone technologies. Very high level encryption can be applied, but you really have to talk closely with the phone provider to make sure that it's put in place if you need it. It's not like if it's not encrypted, it's not like it's easier or harder to tap than an old phone line. You just have to be in the right place at the right time to capture the packets versus having these alligator clips on wires in the right place. But it's not like it's less safe. You'd still have to get into. You'd either have to be in somebody's office to do this tap, or you'd have to be in the phone company's office to do the tap, and those are very, very secure facilities. And it's probably much harder with VoIP to do a line tap like climbed up on a telephone pole.
Yeah, right. That was my thought. Is you don't really have to have much technical knowledge to tap a POTS or plain old telephone service line, right? Because it is, like you said, alligator clips, and you've got the handset, which those were very difficult to get a hold of if you weren't in that industry.
AliExpress, they'll get you one of those.
Well, that didn't exist when previously, but yes, now it would be much easier. But I think there's less threat, and I know that's something that we talk about when we're working with prospects and clients is what we call secure telecom, right? And so it goes back to what's the infrastructure, what are you doing for security measures, and as long as all the things that are in place that should be, then you're also hardening your telephone scenario as well. And so I think it's really what it goes back to is do all the right things you should do from a physical and infrastructure standpoint.
And even if you have the best security on your phone and your phone system and you're talking to somebody else on a different system, security is only going to be as good as their security. And if they're on an old phone line and somebody's got alligator clips hooked up to their breakout box outside their office, there's nothing you can do about it on your end.
And a lot of times it's now with Voiceover IP too. There's usually an admin page where you can just turn on call accounting or call recording, and then it comes down to a couple podcasts ago where we just talked about MFA the entire time. So I think, all that stuff and cutting wires and all that stuff, that sounds difficult, right? The easy part is figuring out somebody's username and password of the phone system and then just grabbing everybody's recordings of every single conversation that happened. So I think that goes back to sure, is it, if you host your voice over IP with company A, sure, is it their security on their side? Absolutely. But then in the more immediate, what's probably the weakest link is you as a small business owner to make, is it like, am I saving my username and password without multi-factor authentication? Am I writing the password down on a notepad? Do multiple people in my organization have admin access to the phone system? Maybe because it was easier real quick because somebody had to make a change. So I'll just make them an admin real quick so they can make one change and then I'll forget that I even added them, 1 year later when they become disgruntled and now they just listen to all our phone calls. So I would say too, a lot of the voice over IP stuff, it comes down to the actual business of, the accountability of who has admin access, who can access the phone, the call recordings. Because those call recordings are saved. You can save them for 6-12 months out. It's download them as an MP3. They're now on the internet somewhere. So I would, if you go voice over IP, definitely see who has access in your company and then review that on a quarterly basis just to make sure somebody didn't give somebody else admin.
Yeah, like any technology, the more advanced it is, the more dangerous it can be if you don't secure it properly.
If you're interested in learning more about this topic, check out our blog post called Benefits of VoIP. There will be a link in this week's episode description, and we will also have a link posted on our website, fullscopeIT.com/resources. That brings us to our story of the week.
This is the story of the week.
Listen up!
And it is brought to us by thehackernews.com. U.S. bans Kaspersky software, citing national security risks. The U.S. Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security on Thursday announced a first-of-its-kind ban that prohibits Kaspersky Labs' U.S. subsidiary from directly or indirectly offering its security software in the country. The company's continued operations in the United States presented a national security risk due to the Russian government's offensive cyber capabilities and capacity to influence or direct Kaspersky's operations. That could not be addressed through mitigation measures, short of a total prohibition. That is what the BIS said.
This is big.
Why did it take this long?
Any thoughts?
Yeah.
Why did it take this long?
Yeah, I think even with all of the political fear, uncertainty, doubt thrown into this, if you're buying security software from a company in another country that you can't get the legal oversight to maintain the contract that you have with them, it's not a good contract. And it's not just Russia. There's other countries where you probably shouldn't be getting security software from them. But yeah, I don't know what took this one so long. Anytime we've run into Kaspersky software or we make the recommendation, you need to move to something that you can feel more comfortable about all of the security and liability issues with this, because you simply don't have that with Kaspersky. I don't think that that's proof that the Russian government is doing something malicious with it, but it's the right choice.
So I just did a quick search. 400 million subscribers. Now that's worldwide, but I'm sure a reasonable portion of that would have been the United States. That's even bigger than I kind of expected that number to be. Wow. Yeah, it's
Do we often run into people that are running Kaspersky? Like Brian, when you're talking to people, is that something you look for?
actually, I can't say it's come up as that's their security tool very often. I'm trying to even think of one in the last
I can't actually remember the last time I've run into it.
Yeah, so that's a good thing, right? So at least we're not running into it a lot. And I think we do a lot of work where, our potential new client was already working with another IT firm. We do plenty that don't and are just using whatever, security tools in general, but it's usually pretty basic antivirus. But yeah. Not that I know of. I can't think of one actually in the last couple of years even. But that's a big one.
Yeah. And I think most, if not all, MSPs would agree with this. And industry-wide, there's a push to use security software that everyone can feel comfortable with.
I'm not sure that they had they're a direct-to-consumer model, right? I don't believe that they had a model that would make sense for companies like us to resell. But but I mean, obviously we're all aware of it, and we know it was plenty of. I think I can think of people I've known through the years. I don't think I've come across it in business. If that makes more sense. Yeah, but glad to see it. I was happy to see this. Because I don't imagine, regardless of right, wrong assumptions or things, that it's still a difficult task to, to actually put a ban on something. Like, I think we generally right, as a country, as a nation.
Yeah. And I think there's been a lot of hand wringing about this being politically motivated, and I don't think it is. I think it's about liability, and the federal government just said that anybody who's using a Google Pixel phone who doesn't apply the June security update has to cease using it for all government activity. I think by the end of the month, which is coming up really
Oh,
soon.
I didn't hear
So
about that one.
yeah, doing the right thing is doing the right thing. Whether you're talking about a Russian company or an American company, you've got to do security the right way.
If there's one thing we talk about the most, right, it's the steps to take and the things to do, and you've got to do these things, and it should never be political or for friendship reasons or anything along. Like, it should be because it makes sense, and you've got to do it that way. So I was, yeah, happy to see that one, but still feel like it took too long.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of the FullScope Cybercast, Safeguarding the Digital Frontier. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode, so until then, stay behind your firewall.